of the night, once again, we gather in search of the truth, dark, and mystery. It's the Drunk Turkey Show.
Big development today in the investigation into the murders of 4 University of Idaho students. According to state and local officials and court documents, 28-year-old Bryan Christopher Kohberger has been arrested. He was arrested and arraigned this morning in Pennsylvania.
We have new details on what Bryan Kohberger was doing right before his arrest. Police says a tactical team burst in to arrest the Idaho murder suspect. He was in pajamas and latex gloves, stuffing trash into Ziploc bags.
Hey, greetings from the year 3000. It still sucks. This is Phil J. Fry, and you're listening to the Drunken Turkey Show. Your one stop for this sort of thing. Hit that button, like and subscribe. You know what to do, just like every other podcast.
You know what to do, just like every other podcast. What is up, everybody? Welcome back to the show. Today there was a hearing, a big one. Some of it private, a lot of it actually private. And then in the end, for about 3 or 4 hours, so to speak, give or take. Then it became a public hearing where we got to listen into for the first time some of the evidence that they have against Bryan Kohberger. We also get to listen into how the defense is also planning on trying, their defense and what they're going to be saying. Today they were talking about the IGG and the Franks motion, or the Franks hearing, to have a Franks hearing. And my first reaction, knee-jerk reaction when I was watching it, right off the bat, I thought that Judge he took command. I thought that he took command of the stage there and didn't allow anybody to walk over him or anything like that. I thought he was fairly direct and very reasonable and very fair to both sides, to be honest with you. And I thought that he was, putting his foot down onto a lot of things that maybe has been a reason why this hearings or this trial has taken so long to start. We're looking at 2025, or in August 2025, that's going to be, getting close up to the 3-year anniversary of when the crimes occurred. It's not, obviously, I guess there's been some other hearings that have gone longer, things like that, but it's not the shortest either. There's been some other cases that have happened since Bryan Kohberger's arrest and have been prosecuted and convicted and are now serving the justice that they deserved. But let's look at a couple things first. I want to look at there's nothing up yet, no order yet in the Bryan Kohberger case, whether or not they're going to go forward with the Franks hearing or on the decision of the IGG. And so what we're going to do is we're going to go into the hearings. I wrote down quite a bit of notes. I got some maps that we're going to look at, but we're going to start off first with a statement from Steve Goncalves. This is referencing today's hearings, both open and closed. He stated, "Today marked a significant stride toward a summer trial, and we were pleased with the positions taken by the prosecution. Jeff Nye emerged as the veritable hero of the proceedings. The hearing unfolded just as our strategy had mapped out, with Anne unable to fulfill her lofty promises. The involvement of the IGG in this case was a grievous misstep by Judge John Judge. It speaks more to removing innocent people than to culpability. Anne's argument is that BK's rights were violated is a stretch beyond credulity." I said that word earlier before I came on. I was saying it right the first time, and now I'm struggling with it. Credulity. It means basically foolish thoughts, right? Especially since his DNA was never part of those genetic DNA databases that she claims were the problem in the first place, as was eloquently argued today BK's Fourth Amendment rights could not have been breached merely because of a relative's genetic information was followed through an FBI search of a family tree. The contracts with the genealogy database do not equate to the constitutional protections of their users, let alone someone whose DNA was found at a crime scene. And then there's the Frank's motion, a last-ditch desperate maneuver by the defense. Typical Taylor does not attempt to confront the evidence, but rather to have it discarded, because explaining it away is simply not feasible. When it is all said and done, this case keeps getting stronger with each hearing, just as we had worked for. And I couldn't agree more with a lot of what Steve was saying here. And I'm going to break it down and go into it. I'm going to touch on basically a lot of what he's saying here, and I agree with. There's nothing really I don't agree with it, to be honest with you. I agree with everything that he said, and I'm going to break it down. So I'm going to talk about all the new developments that were founded out and what they mean, what potential defense strategies and prosecution strategies that we may see, and how it relates to what Steve said. And Steve, thank you again for sending me that and allowing me to read that statement out to our viewers. So let's start it off. And these are just my notes that I wrote down. Judge comes in, he comes out, fire. He's taking control of the scene or the court. He's putting Anne in her place, so to speak. And when it comes to the prosecution as well, he asks them questions the same way as well. But since the prosecution is not trying to sway anybody or use this fancy monologue or the prosecution is just kind of going with the facts and not trying to sway anything by emotion, then I think he sees through it, and it sounds more like he's in the favor of the prosecution than the defense, but I don't think that's the case. So the argument is that there was no warrant for the DNA. We found out that the Idaho State Lab found the DNA. So there's been some arguments and some debates there whether or not the DNA was found, by Othram, and they had to, do some work or whatever the case may have been. We found out exactly what all that meant. The DNA was found, and by the state of Idaho Forensic Lab, and an STR profile was created. That STR or that information or that DNA was sent over to an IgG lab in Houston or near Houston called Othram. And what they were going to do is an IgG on their own. And what we found out today, from what we can gather, if we believe everything that the defense is saying, because some of their words always mean something different. But with Othram, we found out that they did their IgG and couldn't, find a family tree or they couldn't get to a family tree and get it down to anybody in particular that could have been in the area. The FBI goes in there, they get in, they take the DNA, put it into 2 other databases, and from there they're able to connect the family trees to Bryan Kohberger, which right there off the bat tells you that their argument isn't the fact that they did something wrong necessarily, or that the DNA is gonna, had they done it right, that the DNA would have pointed at somebody else. What they're saying is they went into 2 databases that maybe they shouldn't have gone into. Now, I have been saying this for quite a while. For those that have been listening to the channel and tuning in for a while, they'll tell you the same, that I've been saying that the fact that if any violation had occurred, terms of service and policy from the company or even FBI policy isn't law, isn't constitutional. It's policy. That's all it is. And when I was referring that to the policy aspect was because in the documents it read that the FBI wouldn't get involved with the IgG until after law enforcement exhausted all legal tech or not legal, all law enforcement tactics have been exhausted to find somebody, right? So at last resort, and I said, even if they said, you know what, you still have some leads, you still have some things that you're doing, we're going to go ahead and do it anyways. That's violating their own policy. Now, the reason why they have that policy is probably because there's only one FBI and a lot of law enforcement agencies out there that would like to use their services. And so they want to make sure that they are the last option. That way they don't get all, cluttered in and have too much to do and then can get to some of these cases of higher, maybe not necessarily higher importance, but some of these cases that could have been solved by other means if they just continued to do common legal or common traditional law enforcement tactics. So it's mainly to make sure that the load of work isn't too much that they can't do any work for anybody. So that's policy, and that was explained here by the prosecution as well, that even if there was some sort of breach, that breach is a breach of policy. Now, when it comes to who would be a victim of said DNA, that would be, or I'm sorry, who would be a victim of law enforcement going into and using DNA from persons who didn't, that signed up for a place that stated that law enforcement and FBI wouldn't look at their DNA. The only victim is the person that submitted that DNA. That's not Bryan Kohberger. It's those persons who put their DNA in. And that's probably one of the reasons why they also want to keep it hush hush, is because you start telling people's names, people get upset. They might start trying to sue some people, things of that nature. And I can see that maybe perhaps being one of the reasons why they want to keep that silent. And also they mentioned it earlier that they want to keep it silent for the protection of people who are just happen to be related to Bryan Kohberger. Everybody was attacking everybody that has come out in this case, anybody who has spoken up, anybody who has had some sort of family relative, across the board, everything. And so it's not too far beyond the mob to think that it's not beyond them to go and talk to some relatives of Bryan Kohberger's who had nothing to do with this case. But the other argument was when they said that so the arguments were there was no warrants for the DNA testing as well, right? And the biggest answer to that is, or the biggest question from them was that because Bryan Kohberger didn't intentionally leave his DNA behind, that his DNA has some sort of rights that you can't look into like a genetic tree, because then you can find out some medical history about it. Even though it would take a lot of work and research and stuff that hasn't gone into medical stuff, Ann Taylor's just merely said that the possibility of getting Bryan Kohberger's medical records is reason enough that they cannot test the DNA through the IgG because he didn't consent to it. I mean, this is literally their argument. He didn't consent to it, even though he left it behind at a murder scene, and the judge and the prosecution continually tried to explain that to the defense, like, hey, we understand your argument, but that's not what happened here. She even brought up a case where there was a person who was shot. He was in the hospital. They went and collected his clothing. He was considered a victim at the time. And then later on, when the investigation began to, go down, they ended up finding out that he was not just, he wasn't the victim. He was actually the aggressor. He just so happened to get shot. And they ended up using the DNA that they had collected off of his clothes while he was a victim and used it against him. And they were able to throw that out. That's not the case here. Bryan Kohberger isn't a victim here, although there's a lot of people that like to think so. He is not. And so he left his DNA behind. It's up for grabs. The last thing that they wanted to argue about was about the the DNA pool from the trash can that led to Bryan Kohberger's father's DNA being pulled. Uh, and to me that just seemed like a mute argument. The judge, when he was listening to this, kind of explained to her that the intention by having the trash discarded outside gives them the right to confiscate it because they have discarded it. That was the intent. And she tried to argue that it was under ordinance in that area that trash person had to collect it. It couldn't be collected by the FBI or any other law enforcement agency. And well, FBI worked with the trash collectors and they were able to collect it. Now, why they worked with them is probably in a way so that way they don't contaminate anything. They probably told them to, pull it off to this side, put every content in this bag, yada, yada, yada. Make sure it doesn't get into here. And, put it in the front seat or something of that nature, right? So that way it doesn't get contaminated. And that way, as soon as they leave, they can pick that up. It's a good possibility they didn't have anything in that truck and they just went solely to that house and left. And then, another truck came in and picked up everybody else's. Those are possible. But again, these arguments are futile. They're pointless. And it seemed very much so that the judge kind of agreed with those type of, arguments that they weren't anything, and he even said, and I said this multiple times too, that there's more than one way to skin a cat, basically, right? That you can get to your warrants for all these things more than one way. So just the mere fact that they would have a DNA match means that they can now get the warrants for everything else that they got the warrants for already. His phone, the searches for his house, for his car, for all those things. So even if they got something wrong then, all it has to do is be refiled and you're in the same position that you are right now. Doesn't matter. That DNA match is really what got them or has them by the what. Now, when it goes back to the IGG, it was discovered that Bryan Kohberger was not a customer of the ancestry databases that they pulled from. So they made that clear. So it may be somebody close. It may be somebody who is, a very close relative. I don't think so. But, it wasn't Bryan Kohberger. And they were able to solidify that. And I ain't gonna lie, I started laughing when they talked about how knowing and intentionally leaving something behind, like for instance, his DNA on the knife sheath, he didn't knowingly or intentionally leave it behind. So law enforcement shouldn't have a right to do anything other than search CODIS. I thought that was just such a bad argument. You know what I mean? But then again, when that's all you have, that's all you have. You know what I mean? And so it seems like, and it appears though, that the FBI did go into two different databases that they weren't supposed to. But again, that argument is all right. They shouldn't have done those things. That's a violation of policy and violations of terms and services. Those are all internal issues. Those are all civil issues from the fact of the person whose DNA was looked at. And that's an internal issue with the FBI for those that maybe perhaps went into places they shouldn't have gone. They're not legal stances. It's not illegal to do those things. And they even reference that in the documents or in the paperwork that it states that the FBI can go in or the government can come in and look at your DNA if it's referencing a legal matter or not necessarily a legal matter, like instance, like a civil legal matter, but like a criminal matter. So, they have a little loophole there so that way they can get that going. Alrighty. let's see. Got a couple of super chats. I want to say thank you to 49er Girl for being a member for 17 months. I almost said 17 years. We haven't been on the show for 17 years, but thank you. And Canadian True Crime both coming in with 5 Drunk Turkey Show memberships. Thank you so much. All righty. So one of the arguments that the prosecution had reference also the IGG is when it came to the protection of privacy is that the purpose of those sites are to share your DNA. That is 100% the purpose of it. And so, I mean, you can't really, you should know that, that you're losing some privacy there when you're sharing your DNA. And by the way you're sharing DNA is so that you can meet and contact other persons who are related to you or share certain DNA profiles with yourself. Let's see. I wrote, why don't want it out loud in open court? I have no idea what that was referencing to. So yeah, I talked about that already. So we found out that the trash was collected by trash persons in the FBI. So yeah, that was basically the whole first part. Was their argument was the DNA, the IGG, and early on, I know that the subpoenaed, or I believe, let me put it that way, I believe that the person who was subpoenaed, that Deuce's Tecum subpoena, was Detective Payne, and that was referencing this IGG. So basically, and I've been saying this for a while now, also that the defense's angle here is that the Detective Payne didn't find Bryan Kohberger because of some happenstance documented incident where a WSU officer went and found Bryan Kohberger's vehicle at his apartment complex and wrote it down. No, that's not how it happened. It was with the IGG. And so what they're trying to say is that they lied to the judge and to the grand jury when they said that they've located Bryan Kohberger through this, random stuff that they put into the PCA, that nothing really specifies how they got his name. And, I've been saying that was going to be their argument, that they're going to try to say that they lied about it, and that because they lied, they should be thrown out. There should be a Frank's hearing, yada, 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 yada. And it didn't make any sense. And so they then took a break and then came back and they started talking about the Frank's hearing and started talking again about the IGG and what I've been saying from the beginning. They're just using that as a means to determine when they were locked in on a Bryan Kohberger and when the warrants and everything else started taking place. This is something that I've been saying for a very, very long time. And, I get what her argument is. And she came up with some sort of like weird explanation about somebody having a picture and they're a CI. They give it to the police, but they're not so credible because of this or that. It's nothing like this at all, right? When it comes to the IGG, it is it's his DNA was found there at the scene. It was uploaded, and they don't need warrants. They were arguing they needed warrants for all these things. They don't need warrants for DNA they collected left at a scene. That's the same thing as DNA left anywhere by accident or on purpose. Somebody throwing something in the trash, or somebody discards something by forgetting to they leave the premises without it. You know what I'm saying? Without like a cup or something like that. You don't need a warrant for those type of DNAs. So you don't need a warrant or to collect those DNAs. You don't need a warrant for the what you do with it afterwards as well, the CODIS or any of those things. There's never been any warrants for that. And one of the other arguments they have while I'm on the subject of warrants And it is the statements that they made about Dylan. They said that Dylan made some other statements. It wasn't 100% accurate with what was on the probable cause affidavit. But the thing is, I've never seen an entire witness statement on a probable cause affidavit. I've never seen it in all my career. It was a brief career in law enforcement. It's probably about like a little bit shy of 10 years, but I'd never seen it. I'd never seen that. I don't know anybody who has. I've never seen a PCA that has had that information. At the end of the day, the PCA is the bare minimum amount of information to get a warrant. It's not the entire case. Nobody puts the entire case in the probable cause affidavit. And the other thing is that when it comes to a lot of the arguments that Ann Taylor was making, it comes with timing, right? When was the probable cause affidavit made? When did the judge sign off on it? Because she's claiming that, well, if the judge would have known that there was no blood in the car and the apartment and all these other things, then maybe perhaps the judge would not have signed off on the on the probable cause, on the warrant for arrest. However, how could they have known that if they hadn't picked up the car, hadn't arrested Bryan Kohberger, and hadn't searched those places? You get what I'm saying? So, I understood some of their arguments, but at the end of the day, even the judge said it himself. The fact that you have a DNA match and you can, pull that DNA match from a trash pickup that was legal, that matched to the father, that gave you the warrant to go and get Bryan Kohberger's DNA. At that point, you have probable cause to get the phone warrants, to get all those things. But, these are only things I've been saying for a minute. All righty. So DM statements. She said she heard Kaylee, who they claim is impossible. So this is the other thing too. I don't understand. And they just throw the word exculpatory like crazy, right? I don't understand how Dylan's statement saying that she heard Kaylee, because they don't really mention the name, but it's in the probable cause affidavit, that she thought she heard someone who she thought was Kaylee say, "I think someone's here," or something to that effect. So when they bring it up, that's who they're talking about. They're talking about Dylan's statements of her hearing things. And it says that she also heard somebody running up and down, maybe even seen some stuff. And and maybe even seen the person running up and down, which they say is impossible because the person that she identified as the person running up and down or saying those things is possibly Kaylee. And it's impossible because Kaylee had already passed away. But how does that say that wasn't Bryan Kohberger? Like, even if she's inaccurate with what she's saying as far as who she saw running up and down or heard running up and down or what else she may have heard, how does that exclude Bryan Kohberger? These were voices that she didn't recognize, a voice that she didn't recognize. And I think she also said that she thought she heard crying coming from the bathroom. How are those things exculpatory to Bryan Kohberger? How does that say that wasn't him? It doesn't. I just don't get the connection there with that is exculpatory. And then they go further to talk about the dog and say that the dog was in a room with the door open and it didn't have any blood on it, didn't have anything, no traces. We find out that the rooms to the victims' rooms apparently sounds like they were open as well. And they question the fact that the dog goes in and doesn't have blood on him. How is that exculpatory to Bryan Kohberger? You know what I mean? Like, they also talk about how the dog barked, from 4:17 and continued to bark for about 20 to 30 minutes. We find out, with the prosecution also talking about it, the length of time that it was. How is that exculpatory to Bryan Kohberger? Like, this dog was a puppy at the time. It wasn't a full-grown dog. And, it may not have been like a puppy, like 5-6 weeks old, but it was a puppy. And some dogs, not all dogs are as brave as you think they are. And especially at that age, it's probably scared out of its mind. That's probably why I didn't leave that room. We got a super chat in saying Bryan Kohberger and his crying pro burgers. Thank you, Sub Ross. We appreciate that. Or Sub Rosa, I'm sorry. I apologize for that, Sub Rosa. Thank you so much for your $1.99 super chat. Yeah. You're absolutely right. Let's see. Now, when they say it does it match the PCA? Does it not match the PCA? What the PCA says is that Dylan heard, what sounded like somebody playing with her dog. She heard a voice that somebody said, I think someone's here. She thought it was Kaylee. And that she heard some whimpering, and she heard somebody else say, it's okay, I'm here to help you. It doesn't say that she's not saying those things either. You know what I mean? It's not going to have the full witness statement. That's what I'm trying to say. They're only going to put in there certain things that they're trying to allude to. And in the PCA, in my opinion, it was trying to allude to a description, but more of a description that cannot exclude the suspect versus a description that maybe perhaps points towards Bryan Kohberger. Now, Ann does make a good argument saying that, he said he saw the bushy eyebrows and that's what made him know. That's probably not something that you can trust. Right? Because what she's saying is she doesn't remember everything. Some of it sounds like a dream. At the end of the day, this happened, right? Like, this isn't a dream that she had. This isn't a dream. We're not all in her dream. Somebody took the lives of these individuals. And the person that she saw, there's some minor things that she saw that doesn't exclude Bryan Kohberger. Like, for instance, they mentioned race, height, eyebrows, those type of things. She didn't say he was African American, shorter than 5'8", and was a heavier guy. Those things weren't connected there. She said the bushy eyebrows, a Caucasian male, taller than what she was, and was kind of thin, lean. So, what she puts in there in their descriptions to me were just, yes, to not exclude Kohberger, but it was also to determine the timeline. And what time did that argument or did that crime occur? And were they using her statements? And you have to remember what's also in that probable cause affidavit, that Ann Taylor didn't mention her phone information, the download of her phone. So she may have a problem remembering what time this may have occurred or what time that may have occurred. But if she got on her phone at any point or opened it, just at least to see what time it is, even if she didn't, even if all she did was click the button on the side to see what time it was, that is something that would be recorded on that phone, and you'd be able to determine what time that happened. And so that'll match with what she's saying. So as far as having a complete witness statement inside of the PCA, I think that's just something that is unrealistic. Sirius Black comes in saying, can't wait to catch this later. Let's get some justice for these kids. Yes, 100%. 100%. All right. 1 second, y'all. And one thing that I noticed about Ann Taylor that caught my attention when she was talking is she shuffles through a lot of papers to find her answers. And it's a tactic. And I'll tell you what the tactic is. The tactic is to influence the person that's watching that they have a lot of stuff. But if you notice, she's going through the same papers back and forth, talking in between, flipping pages. So she's really not looking for something in particular. All right. She's just going back and forth and back and forth and back and forth. Like I said, that's done to give you the illusion that there's a lot of stuff that they need to talk about. There's a lot of things that are wrong in this case. It's just an illusion. Police officers do that all the time. You know, somebody gets arrested. They're in the interrogation room. You put them in there. You let them sweat it out a little bit. Let them sit there and wait. You know, think about everything. Think about what they possibly, what the police possibly could have, what they don't have. Kind of run through they're running through their mind like, all right, did I make a mistake? How am I going to explain those mistakes? Blah, 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 everything. Then you go in there while they have all this stuff in their head, trying to figure out things. And you come in with this folder that says evidence, and you just have so much stuff in there. You have a DVD case that says evidence, security camera. You put that out there, all that stuff just to make them sweat and, and make them think or give them the impression that you have so much information on them. They already know what's going on. And then the officer's going to tell you that we have all this evidence against you. We know you did this. We just want to know why. And so that's how it starts. And then it goes forward from there. Let's see. Let me see. Queen BJG says BK had 7 weeks to make sure there was nothing to find in his car and apartment. How he was found with gloves on at his parents' house proves what he was doing for the 7 weeks post-crime. Exactly. And I found some interesting things that she said about that as well that I wanted to bring up. So the defense claims that the 1112 residents, the car cannot be identified based on that video. They also claim that you can't see if the vehicle has a license plate or not. I do think that is important. It would have been better had it been there, obviously. But if you can't tell, it doesn't say that he has one or the vehicle has one or the vehicle doesn't have one. But I'm interested to see how it is, because the prosecution went up there and said, hey, just because they can't tell what it is doesn't mean that our investigators couldn't tell what it was. And what I think it was, and they were arguing back and forth, and Ann Taylor was trying to argue about the fact that hold on, where was I going with that? It was with the cameras and stuff. Yeah, so going back and forth, that the judge didn't know that there was multiple cameras and that the one camera that was pictured was at a different time and different place, or whatever the case may have been. And had the judge known that, they may not have signed off on the warrant for probable cause, or for his arrest warrant. I'm sorry. However, in the probable cause, it does say that there was a series of videos and pictures of the vehicle that helped determine which year, make, and model of the vehicle. So they were claiming some things that were just flat out wrong. That was one of them. But one thing that I noticed, she said something about the effect that there's no blood in the car. She clearly says there is no blood in the car. And then when he comes down to the DNA part, she says there's no blood and there's no DNA. And then she stops. Right. And then she goes on and she talks about the blood again in specific areas, and the key fob and the brakes and this and that. But when she talks about DNA, she uses the term lack of. So there's we have the term no blood, none, zero, and lack of DNA in the house, lack of DNA in the apartment. Now, it could very well be that there is no DNA, but what she did say is that there was this spray. And let me see if I can find the exact words, because I wrote them down. I want to see I get it right. She says there's no blood in specific areas, but there is some kind of spray all over the interior of the car to check for. And then she stopped. What is this spray that police found all over the interior of the car, and what is it to check for? There's been a lot of speculation and arguments that maybe perhaps he sprayed his car with luminol to see if he left any blood or those type of things. Judge Hippler even mentioned that there's some explanations to why there wouldn't be blood. That was explained by the prosecution, which talked about these gloves, specific gloves that he could have worn, and specific clothing that he could have wore that he could have taken out and put in a bag as he left. So this argument that there's no blood or whatever the case may have been when he had almost 7 weeks with the car, maybe perhaps it doesn't, hold as much water of him being innocent as previously thought. And then again, there's something in the car. There's something in the car. And the reason why I say this is because, well, Ann Taylor wants the car out, right? I would think that the fact that there's no blood or DNA would be strong enough evidence to say, yeah, I want to keep that no matter what else you find, unless you found something really damning in the car. They mentioned no DNA. Maybe there's a hair found. They mentioned no blood and a lack of DNA. Maybe there's a hair found. Maybe there was, I don't know, a skin cell as well, something of that nature. Those things are possible. Maybe it was an item or a trophy that he brought with him. But they want the car thrown out, which means that piece of evidence would be thrown out as well. What would be so important to have that evidence thrown out that it would have to be more important or more damning than not having DNA in the car? You know what I mean? So that's kind of where my logic goes with that. Then when they talked about the DNA, she continually asked, well, hold on. Let me go back up. So I just wanted to touch on that because I brought that up here a second ago. AT claims no blood in the car. And then she goes, and no DNA. And then that's when she stops and then uses the term lack of for DNA. So that was actually the next place I was going to. And when they were talking about the DNA and the match, this is where the judge says, doesn't DNA match mean PC or probable cause every day and twice on Sunday? I think he's getting fed up with their tactics. When you say things like that, like, come on now, the law, he's getting fed up. I think that, in my opinion, is very, very obvious. Let's see. Sounds like DM's statements were proof of life, explaining why she didn't call 911. Heard Kaylee on the stairs, heard Xana crying, and heard a male saying, "I'm here to help." She thinks it's Ethan. I'm not sure if she thought it was Ethan. I think it was stated a voice she didn't recognize. Nina Drew comes in with a 199 super sticker. But back to your point, thank you, Nina. But back to your point about, why not call 911 for a while? And she didn't know if she dreamt it or she thought it or she was, under the influence of alcohol or whatever the case, and she wasn't sure about what she saw. It's another reason why not to call 911. I'm sure everybody would have been like, well, she should have came out, walked out, and looked. I get it. But it didn't happen. Let's see. They did bring up some interesting things. Now, I don't know if this information has been already identified, but they were talking about, at the time, there was unidentified blood on a rail that belonged to a male, and that there was unidentified blood outside on a glove. So We know that those blood samples didn't belong to any of the victims. But if they're implying that this is maybe a second actor or maybe somebody completely else that done this, that's why there's blood there. Well, one, we don't even know if it's still unidentified. They were talking about at the time that the magistrate signed the warrant. Did they know about the unidentified male railing, a DNA on the railing? You know, the prosecution spoke about how that was in a common place versus like the DNA from the knife sheath, which was on an item that was brought in by the killer and being single source. Well, actually, I don't even know if they mentioned the single source part, but they did mention the part. I think they may have. I'd have to go back and watch, but that was what was a highlight, because that other blood was not found, or from what I take of it, that other blood wasn't found anywhere else. So if the perpetrator endured an injury during the process of the crime, you would expect to have that blood evidence there where that injury occurred. And you don't see it anywhere else. There's no other blood anywhere else on the victims or in any part of the room or anything else. It's just on that hand railing. And then there's another piece of evidence that shows that there's another unknown male DNA blood on a glove outside. Again, like, there's no telling when those things occurred, right? Could they have occurred well before the murders? Yes. Could they have occurred the night before the murders? I mean, there was a lot of people that were in there. Is it possible somebody had a bloody nose or something to that effect? Possible. You know, at some point. I hope they've already identified who it is, but you know, I find it hard to connect the dots that somebody else committed this crime and there's evidence of a blood trail in the house, or evidence of blood in the house, but not a trail of blood and not any blood where you would have expected the injury to have occurred. Right. And so, since this also tells me that there's probably no fingernail DNA, which is something that I've been saying for a long time, that they didn't have. Whoever came in there committed this crime, you know, took the victims by surprise. You know, I think the only person that may have been alive after hearing what everybody had said in court today, that that Xana was probably the only one still alive. We also found out from the defense that the crime, they believe, took place in the matter of 13 minutes. So that was from the defense. That was Ann Taylor that said that this was all done in 13 minutes. Now, I know there's been like some debate about how much time. Some people said 8, some said, you know, more. I said 11 to 12. You know, I factored in that he's probably going to change before he gets in, and that might take about 45 seconds to a minute. I didn't think he'd be driving around in his vehicle with that, you know, his clothes to go in there to commit the crime on. I felt that would have tracked his DNA that he would have had in his car with him into the house, and there would have likely left some sort of DNA evidence there. So 13 minutes is a long time. It is a long time. You know, there was a guy, it was in Australia, stabbed 3, what was it? He killed 6 folks by stabbed like 15 total, 6 passed. And he did this all in a matter of like 15 minutes or something, or 18 minutes. And like an extreme amount of that time, like majority of that time, like 15 or like 12 minutes or so, was him running from police and law enforcement. All his victims were awake and alert. They weren't, it wasn't in the middle of the night, and, you know, they weren't asleep and perhaps under the influence of alcohol. So there's some big differences there, but 13 minutes is what we got. Let's see. The judge tells so when Ann goes in there about, well, if the judge would have known this, that, and a third, you know, judge comes in and says, hey, the PCA is not proof beyond reasonable doubt. That is not the preponderance of evidence that is required for a PC to arrest somebody. And it's true, it's not. It's just the bare minimum that you required to say, hey, we have enough evidence to believe that this person could go to trial or should go to trial and be charged for these accounts or for these murders. So take that for what it is. Let's see. But what she did ask when it came to the DNA is, she said, the real question is how the sheath got there. And then she also says, the other question is, what is a knife sheath? So that kind of tells me a little bit of the direction of where she's going with her argument when trial comes. She's going to say something to the effect that a knife sheath isn't a knife. It's not the murder weapon itself. And then she's going to say that when did it get there? Is it possible that this knife sheath had been there for a while? Maybe the victims owned it or something, right? So that just kind of tells me when she goes, what is a knife sheath? And, how it got there. And those are going to be the two things that she mentioned there that are kind of going to allude to what her defense strategy is probably going to be. Yeah, and she says that there was no other blood or DNA in the house beside the two that were on the rail and the one that was outside. And so, like I said, that tells me that if there's no other DNA there, then it didn't really happen during the commission of the crime. Because if it happened during the commission of the crime, somebody went and took the lives of 4 people. You would expect to find evidence of that blood there. It just didn't happen. So my question is, why wasn't it anywhere else? And then, again, the argument from the defense was that they didn't tell the judge these things at the time when they got the PCA signed and got the warrant for Bryan Kohberger's arrest. But the warrant or the PCA was signed before the vehicle, the apartment, and all those things were searched. So I think that that means something. The argument then come in about the stalking, right? So Ann Taylor says that there's no evidence of any stalking. There's no evidence of Bryan Kohberger stopping outside of that residence, driving by the residence, or any of those things before or sitting up there. I don't know if it says driving by. I think it says sitting there, stopping for any amount of time, constantly passing by. None of those things, right, is what they said. And that there was no connection online through the phones and through social media and other things like that. Now, I don't know what the prosecution's argument's going to be, but I think that the reason why they were so adamant in the fact that there was no evidence that Bryan Kohberger was stalking anybody in that one hearing is to make sure that that doesn't bite them in the butt, right? Because they put that in the PCA. Now, what they put in the PCA isn't not factual. I know that's a double negative, but it's not something that is not factual, right? It is factual. The Bryan Kohberger's phone did connect to a tower that would be the same tower that would connect to the 1122 King Road residence. It just doesn't say, how close he got to it or any of those things. It's just that he connected to it. Does that make you, me, and everybody else believe that he is possibly out there stalking? Yeah, in the manner that they wrote it did. But does that mean that Bryan Kohberger didn't stalk them? Not necessarily. There may not be proof or evidence of it right now, but, if he turned off his phone, and like I said, cloud-based forensics is his expertise in criminal justice, he may have known to turn off his phone other times or put it in airplane mode or do those other things when he was stalking. So, again, that's just my speculation. There's nothing that proves that or says that. I just feel that that's probably, in my opinion, a good possibility of what would have happened, knowing how he would have been investigated. I think that would have been a huge component to that. I think he put a lot of effort into planning this crime. I mean, you don't go in there and take the lives of 4 people without leaving any DNA of yours at the scene. I mean, he left the knife sheath with DNA on it at the scene, but he didn't leave his DNA, on the, with the bodies or on the, anywhere in the vicinity or any of those things. So in order to do that, you really have to methodically plan this. And then you also have to methodically plan everything else. So the planning doesn't stop at the murders. You're going to want to plan for, hey, they're going to be looking for a white Elantra. They might see mine. They might come up to me and want to, check my vehicle, this is that, and the third. So he may have, pre-planned and prepared his vehicle before he made the drive out there. Now, I know a lot of people are going to say, it was like, well, if he got pulled over and his car's dextered out, doesn't that mean that, that he obviously is about to do something? Well, yeah, but if, he got pulled over after the fact too, and he's full of blood, or there's, blood in the back of the truck, or a bag with blood in the trunk, or if he's driving around without clothing or things like that, that's going to be kind of suspicious as well. So either way, I would have highly suspected him to have, planned the escape, planned a lot of things that came with that. Let's see. So yeah, I already said that. DM statements wasn't so the prosecution says that DM statements weren't a dream because there was actual evidence that they found the next day of the crime. It wasn't a dream. It was real. 4 people lost their lives. You know what I'm saying? So just because she didn't know what was a dream, what wasn't a dream, or things of that nature, she thought it was a dream. So people passed away, so she was not dreaming. They also brought up again, like, fingerprints. They brought up fingerprints one at a time, or at least so they had the experts, and I think it was like, it's not like fingerprints where you leave those behind her. I think it was having to do with the DNA being left around. Now that I remember it, but I could have swore there was something else about fingerprints. So the defense described the single latent print that was on the edge of the door or off the edge of the door, and it's not repeated anywhere else. So that one's weird. I mean, I would assume if somebody had a latent print, they probably, well, I don't know. I'm going to leave that to an expert. I'm going to ask Steve, because they talk about one print, but this person's saying that it's not repetitive throughout the house. So, she didn't argue it wasn't a size 13. That would have been one argument, right? Like, hey, it was a size 10, 9, or 15, 16, something of that nature, which isn't what Bryan Kohberger wears. So that wasn't an argument there. So, we also have to kind of look and read between the lines there. My thoughts on Ashley Jennings, the prosecutor there at the end, or the attorney representing the prosecution at the end, is that I think I wasn't impressed. I was not impressed with what she was saying and how she was saying it, and how she was going about her, her questioning and questions to the judge. I felt like the judge was kind of guiding her on what to say, because it was a pretty, like I said, it's a futile argument by the defense. It's not going anywhere. By all accounts, from what I could tell, it seemed like the judge already made his mind up as far as the Franks and the IGG, and it's not in the favor of Bryan Kohberger. However, he did tell her at one point, like, you can't be bringing up things in your response, right? We got to keep it to the other stuff, before. And she kept going at it. And at one point he said that if she continues to do that, then he's going to have to give them a proper Frank's motion, meaning he wasn't going to, right? And she continued to go there. So, I mean, if they get it, I think it's based solely on that. It sounded like to me that the judge had made his decision beforehand. We'll see. We'll see. But I thought she couldn't answer some simple questions he was trying to get to, like, for instance, Dylan's statements and what why they were important in the PCA and stuff like that. And it's just, I hope that the other prosecutors have more involvement in this. Let me just put it that way. Let's see. Okay, we talked about the single footprint. Someone crying in the bathroom. Okay, in a voice she didn't recognize. There you go. That's what it was said. So it was that just because that Dylan said, or that they didn't put in there that Dylan, didn't hear the crying and a voice that she didn't recognize, or whatever the case may have been, wasn't in there. They don't have to put everything in there. This is just, and that's the way they should have left it, to be honest with you. Like when they came in with those statements, I was like, hey, we're not going to put her entire witness statement. The stuff that she said was factual. Those things were what she did say. We may not have, and she's trying to use omission and a lot of different things for things that weren't ready or available yet, like the search warrants of the car, house, apartment, things like that. But those things had no bearing on the case. I mean, even if you were to take out her entire statement saying, all right, well, let's throw out what Dylan saw, right? We still know that she said she heard something, and that's when she checked her phone or whatever. There's a digital timestamp right there of when she opened her phone. That's going to be able to establish the timeline in which something happened, right? And that's all you need that for. I mean, it'd be one thing if she said she saw somebody of a different race and things like that, but that wasn't the case. So even if you throw out her testimony about what she saw and only use what was recorded off of her phone, still establishes a timeline. Let's see. Now let's talk about the camera that they were referencing. Here it is. So the prosecution or the defense is claiming that there is a camera here at the make sure I'm done. At the 1125 Ridge Road home, and that this is approximately 3 minutes before the white Elantra is seen entering the crime scene, and that this is about a third mile away from the crime scene. So right here, the clearest picture of the car. This is the address there on Ridge Road, and here's the crime scene. So it's fairly close. If I were to measure it out real quick from here. Oh man, that's in the way now. So let's measure this out. It's a little bit further than a third mile away from the way if you actually drive it out, and it's closer to about half a mile. But all right, I mean, if you're driving them, half a mile, take about 3 minutes. Sounds about right. And so this is where it's located. Now let me see something real quick. Let's take a look here. I wasn't sure about cameras or where they were, but I think maybe we might be able to see it here. Now that's a laundry. So this is the address. This is the one on Ridge Lane. I'm not sure what camera they have. Maybe at the time of this photo, a camera wasn't there yet. I see those look like regular lights to me. But I don't know. I don't know when was this. I'm not sure when this photo was taken. Maybe there's a Ring camera on the door somewhere. We can't see, it's too far. Possible. I see there's some cars back here. Maybe they have a Ring camera on the back side. All right, none there. And I can see at least. But this is the address that they claim is what has the clearest picture of Bryan Kohberger's vehicle. And this is the one that they used to that they use for the identification. So there's a couple of different places that this vehicle could have been traveling from. I'm not sure what camera is on there now or when, but if it's a camera up here, I don't know. And apparently, this is clearly some sort of apartment complex, right? It looks like you have apartments down at the bottom, at the top. You have multiple satellite dishes. That's typically because you have multiple different. So you have one, two, three. I think I saw some other ones in the back as well. For all for direct TV, dish, stuff like that. So that's typical from an apartment complex. You have 4 different units here for the AC. 4 different units there on this side, more units here. So clearly this is a little apartment complex. I would assume that maybe they recently put cameras on there. But what angles could you have seen? If he is going this direction and the cameras were at the front of the home, it's probably going to get a. They did mention something about a corner of another camera around here somewhere. But I'm not sure. You see, I don't know about any cameras, but if there was one up here facing outward, it would see this entire curvature here, this road here, depending on which way it's facing. So either way, you would be able to see the front end of that vehicle, in my opinion. Also, notice that Ann Taylor or any of the defense didn't say anything about a sunroof. I keep getting that in my comment section. Oh, there was a sunroof. There was a sunroof. No, there wasn't. They didn't even bring that up. So where is this relative to some of Bryan Kohberger's routes that we have? Alrighty. So when it comes to the first time that the PCA says that Bryan Kohberger is seen on camera is at 3:26 a.m. at the 700 block of Indian Hills Drive. And then it talks about him going straight towards the victim's residence as he is seen crossing Steiner here and then goes in and turns into where the residence is. And you have cameras here, and here capturing the motion, right? The movement from one place to another. The good thing about this happening in the middle of the night is that you're not going to have so many cars passing by and things of that nature. So it shrinks down possibilities here, right? And so if it was somewhere up here and it was taking an image from the road here, that would be on par with him traveling in this direction from what was claimed to have been when he started off at 3:26. Same thing could be said at 3:45. He is seen traveling this direction towards this is on, oh gosh, what was this on? This is on one of the other highways. This is where the gas station was taken at 3:45. And then he was traveling the same direction as this white truck here. And then the vehicle then turned down this direction here towards the south. So from here this way, and this is where the gas station tape came in. If you go straight here, That also leads you straight onto this path that would have gotten you in front of this home here. And since it's not really that far away, it could have been one of the other times where, he was just kind of circling the area that he came in front of this house. You know what? Let me check something. Anything back? Oh, that one's blurred out. I wonder why. But yeah, no, it's this house over here. So I was wondering if maybe there's a camera back here. Now, the other thing that they were talking about when it came to, I guess, time and stuff like that. Let's see. As they were talking about the direction of Bryan Kohberger's vehicle at the time that his phone went off network. That was one of the last things that they mentioned. And let's look into that. Let's look into the direction of travel. Let's look into the timeline. This is something that Ann Taylor claims is something that is exculpatory. Let's remember that she considers this exculpatory. Okay. You know what? Hold on. Let me pull up something else real quick. Real fast. I need to send something to myself. Just bear with me real quick. Oh, man, I was hoping they would save. Oh, well, never mind. All righty. Took some screenshots of this map that I have here that I wanted to go over because I measured this all out. So the PCA says that Bryan Kohberger's phone turns off somewhere around here at like 2:47 in the morning, right? And that afterwards it's seen leaving, heading towards the direction of southwest or SR 270, which would lead back to Moscow, and would be the fastest direction to travel for Bryan Kohberger. What the defense was claiming was that his phone didn't stop registering to the network at that time, that it was an additional 7 minutes that went on afterwards, and that the location of travel and the direction that they were going isn't consistent with him going to Moscow. Now, the one thing that is going to be kind of maybe not so much concerning, but there is a question, because there was a camera here at Floyd's Cannabis that captured a white vehicle traveling this direction at around, early in the morning hours. Now, is it possible that Bryan Kohberger came down this way? Probably not. I mean, let's talk about what his defense has said. The defense is saying that he's going a different direction, and that matters, right? Not taking into effect that he can merely just turn the car around. But there are some cameras and stuff that are here. And this was one that I had questioned. Now, is it possible, and I probably should have looked this up, that Bryan Kohberger turned a different route and then maybe perhaps went around Pullman somehow and then still ended up on 270? Maybe. I have to go and map that out. I haven't, I just thought about that right now. Because remember, he even if it was 254, he's not seen on camera until 328. That's the first time that they were able to spot him in Moscow, or the White Elantra in Moscow. So the other thought I had is maybe he went a different route, a route that would have less cameras. And if he were to go down this same route, like I mentioned before, towards 270, and then continue south and then head out towards southwest, right, towards the Wawa Park, which is out this way. Now remember, here's the Wawa Park. So if he's heading out that direction here, remember, the prosecution mentioned that he was in Pullman when the phone went off. So it wasn't way out here, but let's just say he did get, because I think he could probably get somewhere here, turn up here. We'll do this in real time real quick. Turn up here. Okay, and then turn back this way. I'm sure there's some cameras here he has to figure out about, so that's probably not it. I'll have to go through this and figure it out at a different time. But is there a route back to Moscow with him going this direction and his phone turning off in Pullman at 2:54? Is it possible to get from here to here in or to Moscow at least within the, let's see, it was 2:54, 3:28, so it's over 30 minutes, or 3:26, so it's about 32 minutes. Can he get from this direction there? Well, if he travels this road that I have highlighted here, it'll have him going towards the Wawa Park. But then if you turn off here at this road and then kind of continue up, you're back over here on the route that has you going into Pullman. Now, maybe he went back this way and up back on SR 270 and went that way. That's quite possible. You know what I'm saying? It has him coming in from a different direction that he left. Or even if he went this way, this is the longer route, by the way, to come down to, go through Busby, all the way through this red line here, and then catch up here where I had initially have the route that he traveled after the murders to get out of Moscow without having the without being seen on camera. And you can come in here, pull in here, and you're in this area in Moscow. How much time do you guys think that would have taken? Well, the drive here, this drive right here from North Bishop Boulevard down this road here, all the way around and up to Busby, is 6.66 miles. Go figure, right? So from that area to here is 6.66 miles. I mean, let's just say you can travel that in about 8 minutes, and that's being very, very, let's put it 10. Him driving cautious. It's icy. There's fog. Remember, there was fog, overcast, and ice that night. So maybe he was driving slow because he couldn't see anything in front of him, much less the stars. The iciness and all that other stuff. So let's give him 10 minutes there. Then from here, from Busby all the way through this red line up to when you get into Moscow is 8 miles. I believe it was, let me tell you the right amount, 8.11 miles. So you have 6.66 and you have 8.11. So what is that? Like 14 miles, 15 if you add the, the 0.66 and the 0.11, just be on the safe side. So you have 15 miles of driving. Do you think he can get 30 minutes in 15 miles? Even if you're doing 30 miles an hour, you should get there in 30 minutes. Well, no. All right. My math's all messed up there. But anyways, if you're doing 30 miles an hour or 60 miles an hour, 15, that's what, 15 miles. That's what, 15 minutes. After that, 7, twice as that is 30. So yeah, you still get there in time. Now, I think that if, all he did was come through here, turn back up and go this direction. Well, let's see how so we know that this is, this red line here circling all the way around to Busby is 6.6 miles. Well, let's figure out how many miles it would be from here. Okay, let's follow this up. And let's see, almost there. I want to see how long it would take him to get to Floyd's cannabis shop. And we're about 8 miles there. So roughly, I would say if he did that, turned around and went back up, it's probably between 15 to 20 minutes. And 25, and that's just giving him a lot of cushion to get from there to here. And I mean, you're still looking at him getting into Moscow with about 10 miles on top of the 6 here. So that's 16 miles total going either direction. Let's see. So in my opinion, I don't understand how it's exculpatory if he's facing one direction when his phone goes off, and then like when his phone comes back on, it's way over here anyways, just south of Moscow. You know what I mean? Like, you had to get back this way somehow. It's not like he went through the Walleye Park and then drove through a canyon or a cavern or a cave or something and hit a wormhole and shown up all the way over here. He had to have traveled back at some point. So he did, right? I mean, we can attest to that. And at some point he did travel back. Let's see. So there it is. I don't see how that's exculpatory. And then it goes back to what, the other words that they use that were exculpatory. They said that it was exculpatory because right here at this machine shop and over here, there's some cameras, and that these cameras didn't capture a white Elantra traveling south on 95 here. And she's like, oh my God, that screams exculpatory. There's not a picture of him traveling this direction. But way before she even came up with that, I mean, if you just do a quick Google search, you can find this path without any cameras. I mean, when I did this, I went in and did the entire thing. No joke. I went in here like this and scrolled through all these fields of nothingness and did the whole thing looking to see if I can find a camera or something on somebody's stuff, right? I thought at one point this was a camera, but it's not. It's floodlights that are going back both different ways. I had this image blown up. I don't know how many times to try to figure out if that's what it was. I did my due diligence on all this. And I went through it all, and I didn't come in contact with the camera going this route that I had created as a possible route for Bryan Kohberger. Let's see. First camera right here. It's back in Washington already. And this was the first camera that I found in that entire trip. And they were right there. Above the door. I believe I had found a few cameras on this property, to be honest with you. But yeah, this was the first place that I could find any cameras. Everything else, I mean, let's take a wild guess here. Let's see. I should just stay in, facing north. But let's see. Right here near Genesee, where, this is where it pinged. There could be a camera here. There's a city there. Wow. Look at that for as far as the eye can see. Ain't no cameras out here. And so for her to say, oh, yeah, it's exculpatory because, there's no camera. He's not caught on camera going this direction anywhere. There's no cameras there to be caught on. I mean, where are the cameras? I mean, are we really to believe that if there is a camera there, that's going to pick up way over here in the middle of the night? No. Let's be realistic, people. Let's see. We can pick another random spot if you'd like. And then I'm going to do some super chats, and then I'm going to call it a show. So let's see. That's the first camera. Again, this has me all backwards. This has me facing south now. There we go. Let's see. She said on 95. So let's pick a random spot on 95. Right here. Where do you think the cameras are at here? Ain't no cameras out there. So for her to say, oh my God, extreme's exculpatory. Come on now. But again, when you don't have anything to stand on, you stand on, I guess, this. All right, let me see. I think I had seen another that I may have missed. Artworks 2 says Kohberger looked like he was shrinking into his chair. When I was watching him, I mean, he has that look, right? And when the prosecutors were talking, I mean, he just stares straight at them. And I mean, there's nothing wrong with it. It doesn't say that he's crazy or anything like that, but it's just a creepy ass stare that he has. And yeah, I think you can see a little bit of nervousness. I think he knows that his arguments weren't working, that they weren't going to win. And I'll be interested to find out how those things go down. There's going to be another hearing tomorrow. I'll be back on here tomorrow, talk about the hearing after I get out of work. Well, maybe not. I work all day tomorrow, so I don't know how much of the hearing I'll be able to hear. If it's an all-day thing, I may not be able to hear everything. You know what I'm saying? So I want to hear it all first. So I'm going to try to do that throughout the day. If I'm able to do that, in between, on my breaks and stuff like that, then I'll do a show tomorrow night. If not, I might run it on maybe Saturday once I've had an opportunity to go. That's an if, because I know Saturday night I got some potential plans. And then Sunday, guys, might have a special guest on for you. So please hit that like button, hit that subscribe. It's going to be actually potentially 2 special guests on the show, on the channel. You guys won't be disappointed. And so I want to say thank you to everybody that is tuned in, everybody that is what's going on, Tony? Tony says Bryan is not guilty. Okay. Let's see. See some other creators in here. I hope you guys are doing well. I haven't really looked into the live chat too much just because that's so much to go over. What do you think about the prosecution's argument today and how she presented it? Well, she probably means that we're talking about Ashley Jennings. I didn't like what she said. I didn't like how she presented it. Like, she didn't say anything that wasn't like not true. You know what I mean? I just didn't like her presentation. I think she may be an issue to the prosecution, just being honest. To me, it seems like she may be over her head. But the other prosecutors are on their game. And again, this is just the preliminary stuff. I'm hoping that whatever nerves that she may have, because there could be some nerves associated with this. This is a big case. There's millions of people who are watching this across the world. I'm hoping that by the time the trial comes, she might be more accustomed to that and not look as flustered as she did today. There's no cameras because they GPS the cows. You guys are great. You guys are great. Kohberger's lost some weight. I noticed that too. I noticed that too. All righty, guys. Well, you guys, I thank everybody for being in here, tuning in, and hit that like button, hit that subscribe button. We got one more question. First, we got Sam saying, I think she's probably really intelligent but can't speak well publicly. I think that's a good possibility there. Great show as always. Thank you, Rebecca Bruce. We appreciate you. Appreciate everybody here that's tuned in. Until next time, you guys be safe, be warm, and we'll see you then. Peace.